I'm not normally the type of person to write on Reddit, but I wanted to practice sharing to a screen before I try sharing any of this shit in therapy one day. Also, I just need to scream into the void. To start, I, 30 female, have an extremely strange relationship with most of my family. The only people I'm even remotely close to is my aunt and my gran, though it's been a very complex situation since the start. I should begin with the fact that my parents, 52 male and 52 female, had me when they were 22. They were childhood sweethearts. That was the way my mom described it, but I couldn't possibly describe them like that. My father was a monster. I say was because he died last 2 months ago, but more on that later. My parents had me at 22, unmarried. My gran demanded that, as a devout Christian, they had to get married now, which was a horrible mistake. You see, both of my parents are special needs. My mother has FASD, while my father was in an accident as a child that gave him severe brain damage. Both of them are about the level of a young teenager when it comes to impulse control and problem-solving capabilities. She thought by making them step up and become a family, it would help them form a tighter-knit bond and become closer. It didn't. Instead, it added a terrible strain on the relationship. My mother came from an abusive home, and my gran had taken her under her wing in a hopes to help. It was just sort of the thing that she did, but since day one, they never got along. My gran is mean, saying terrible things about my mom and treating her horribly whenever my dad and mom got into a fight, which was often. Yeah, Dad was a mama's boy. Major ick. My gran never forgave herself for my dad's accident, which my grandfather blamed her for. It wasn't her fault, let's just say that. He also died before I was born, so I never met him, but he sounded like a royal dick. And so she spent her whole life treating him like an angel. Instead, she created a monster who did what he wanted when he wanted, including abusing his wife and child, me, cheating on my mom, stealing from us, locking us up, etc. This man was massive, 6'5", 300 pounds. He had no qualms with hitting anyone who didn't stand up for themselves, including me and my mom. To this day, my gran claims she never saw any bruises and gets upset if I bring up his abuse. It was constant, too. One time I jumped on the couch and he threw me across the room for interrupting his taped videos of wrestling matches. Anytime I said anything he didn't like, I was hit for it, or locked in my room, or disowned because I was a useless shithead of a daughter and kicked outside the house until he remembered to bring me in. He was terrible, and I became violent because of it. I'm not big, in fact, I'm an average height, but holy shit am I strong. I can't downplay it. I can deadlift 340 pounds and have taken on guys twice my size. I became a heathen in school. I grew violent, which worked because we lived in a poor neighborhood where you had to watch your back. Well, my parents did because they could only afford part-time jobs. They had money in disability checks too, and Gran paid for things, but they spent it all on things for themselves and racked up huge credit card debt every time Gran paid one off. One time I walked in on Gran yelling at them because they were given money to buy me presents, but ended up only spending it on themselves. Multiple times, the only food in the house was instant ramen and milk, but it was Dad's, and no one was allowed to touch the milk.
Back to my violent tendencies. You know how when kids become violent in school, the first thing teachers ask is, what's going on at home? I told a teacher about what was happening. He phoned my home and essentially gave a very stern warning to my parents that if this persisted, he would call CPS. Every single adult in my family told me to stop lying. But what struck me more was my gran saying, "Do you want your dad arrested?" Because it was clear she already knew what he was. I told her, yes, I wanted him to go away. Gran was horrified and cried after berating me for lying. She must have said something to him, though, because he didn't hit me again, but he'd put food high on the shelves where it was impossible to reach, or he'd lock cupboards or hide it altogether. Gran started having visits and would check in and fill the cupboards. According to her, I was horrifically skinny. I was. Sometimes I didn't eat at all until I got to school and the lunch lady would give me some free snacks. She seemed to finally notice I was dressed in rags, literally old clothing of my mom's. She's 4'9" and I was her height at 8. That was torn and fading. They claimed I never wanted clothing and wouldn't wear what they bought me, but they never bought me anything. The only objects in my room were toys Gran bought me, or my bed that had bedding I don't think was ever washed. There's a photo of me on that bed, in rags, and the white sheets are yellowing and gray where I would lay. After that, Gran started taking me part-time to be sure I would be fed and dressed properly. I would be at her house any weekend or holiday or summer break. Only if I went to school would I be with my parents. She owned a small acreage outside of the city with a cute homestead that my aunt, her daughter, would operate. Nothing big, but enough to keep them busy. To go back a tiny bit, my gran was literally at rock bottom as a child. She was poor enough that her and her 16 brothers and sisters were starving in a two-bedroom apartment while her alcoholic parents went out and partied or brought people home to play with the girls. My gran would barricade them all in a room overnight and stand guard. When she tells me of this, I understand our family trauma a bit more. But my gran is a tough-ass bitch. She worked hard. She raised 2 kids, my aunt and dad, and dealt with her useless husband while simultaneously working 4 goddamn jobs. She would work all night cleaning businesses, then work part-time in sales during the day. Because of her past, she never got to finish school and dropped out at middle school to work. She had her first child when she was just 16. Her husband was 18 at the time. My aunt bought into the business, and they are now both earning 6 figures each quarterly. Good for them. My dad refused to take part and opted for a part-time job instead to get his freedom, which is why he is partially estranged from them despite running crying to my gran any chance he got. And she just took him back. He was abusive to her too, and she just took it. Anyway, when I was about 9, my parents had another major fight where my mom was shoved down the stairs. I saw him look at me, and I remember feeling like I was actually going to be murdered in that moment. I ran, out the house and down the street. I ran all the way across town to my gran's house and begged her to take me. My dad eventually showed up to collect me, but when my gran saw me literally clawing at the windows to escape, she finally asked what happened. My dad was livid and said I pushed my mom down the stairs and that I'm going to get what I deserve. My gran believed him, but that was only because my mother told her it was true. I begged her to believe me, but she didn't. However, she felt that my behavior was too violent for them to handle, so she took me anyway. I wasn't treated terribly here. Well, sort of. Whenever I ate food, she would call me a pig for eating, but then never let me leave the table until the food was done. I eventually stopped eating again, so she added something, I don't know what, she only admitted to this a few years ago, to my food that gave me insatiable hunger. I ate around 6,000 calories a day, and by the time I was 13, I had gained 170 pounds. I was now at my heaviest of 265 pounds. She gave me shit all the time for it and would cut my food to just 1,000 calories per day. I was starving and learned to sneak food. I had developed an eating disorder because I would hide everything I ate and had this horrendous obsession with food. I also learned I could sneak out. That whole thing about strict parents make sneaky kids? Totally true. By day, I had to attend Bible study and volunteer labor on my aunt's homestead. By night, I was sneaking into bars with friends and absolutely going to places I should never have been. I remember one night my friend started flirting with these adult men, and I tried to make her leave, but it was getting too dangerous, so I had to leave her. In 6 months, she was pregnant with a 24-year-old baby daddy at 15. The only reason that wasn't me was because my father ruined any trust I could ever have in a man. I couldn't even get close to one without freaking out.
When I got my driver's license, my aunt and gran offered me a job in their business. I took it, but didn't realize what that meant. Essentially, anytime someone didn't go to their shift, I would cover for it. But you'd be amazed how many people canceled. They bought me a car, but that was just to go to my work appointments. I hated work. One coworker was a 50-year-old man who was disgusting. I was paired with him for cleaning restaurants a lot. He would say highly inappropriate things like, "You're jailbait in that skirt," or "You'll be legal in a few years," or try to get me alone. He would walk in on me trying to use the bathroom, then claim he didn't know. Happened way too often, and he had to unlock the door sometimes to enter. I told everyone about him, but was told he's not actually looking at someone like you. That guy was foul. I hate him with a passion. He still works for them and is constantly trying to fuck any women he sees. I told him I was a lesbian once. I'm not. But I prayed it would work when I turned 18, thinking it would scare him off. It didn't. He offered to fix me, but when I dared him to elaborate, he backed off. This entire time, I was still forced to interact with my dad and mom. My mom is extremely selfish, but she is also incredibly meek and weak-minded. Probably a cruel way to look at her, But all I see is a woman who, whenever she needed a break from my dad, would leave me alone with him for months at a time while she went to find herself back when I lived with them. My parents basically abandoned/disowned me, though, when I turned 17 because my little brother was born. They literally stopped interacting with me and would only talk about their son. They were significantly better parents with him, but not by a lot. Probably because my gran checked in on him almost daily, to be sure. My brother's a little shit, but I think he'll turn out okay. I remember the first time I got to stand up against my dad. I was 18, my parents were in a fight again, mom didn't come over for dinner. I don't remember how it started, but dad was asked about my mom and where she was. Dad admitted to getting in an argument and smacking some sense into her. I don't remember exactly how it went down, but I told him something along the lines of, "If you hit her again, I'll shove you down the stairs this time," or something along those lines. It was enough that the table went dead silent. My father tried to argue, but I stood up and asked if he wanted to take this outside. He backed down after I yelled, "You don't hit your wife," so loudly I think I scared everyone a little. My dad confronted me about it later, actually threatened me saying, "I brought you into this world, I can take you out of it." He said it a lot in my later years, and even punched me in the face. I got a black eye, but when I didn't back down and was mentally and emotionally ready to go down fighting, he backed off. No, not just backed off, he ran. I've been told I look ready to kill sometimes. Some friends tell me to please be mindful when I'm upset because I look terrifying. I guess I've perfected the actual murderous intent stare. Because my dad not only flung himself back so fast he crashed through the door, he wet himself. I think he actually thought he'd be meeting God that day, but all I could see was the man who had beat me and everyone else in this family and treated like absolute garbage, and I was so fucking embarrassed that I was ever afraid of him. Legitimately, this was embarrassing, because I was actually ready for him, and he wouldn't even give me that. After my gran saw this, she tried to make me forgive my dad. "He's mentally disabled and doesn't understand," is what she begged for me to understand. I'd heard it all through my life, how he didn't deserve my hatred because he didn't understand what he was doing. But the irony of my mother, who was even further on the special needs scale, was not granted the same freedom. My gran treated other women, even her own daughter, like garbage. My aunt in all of this was a separate entity. Without her, I'm sure I would have killed myself. She became a mother figure, but refused to ever be called my mom and gave me shit anytime I tried. She said, "Not my kid, not my problem," but was also the only person who gave advice or genuinely cared about me, it seemed. She got me into sports and was the reason I learned about image. She spoiled me a lot. Unfortunately, that spoiling was all other family members saw. Remember how I said my gran worked out of the rut she was in? Not all 16 siblings did. Some stayed there and brought family into it. That family hated me. Genuinely, some of them would say at family gatherings, "Wish my father would have kept the fucking condom on for this one." Yeah, I fucking hate them too. Most of them are the poor me or pick me or not my fault I'm like this types. Some of my cousins were addicts, and my gran tried to use her acreage as a rehab place. She was super unqualified and just made things worse. Most of the time, my cousins tried to fight me or would literally spit on me and call me the luckiest bitch in the world. By the time I was 22, I had considered killing myself a few times, gone through a total crisis in identity and other things, and hated myself for shooting myself in the foot with university. To put it simply, despite all of this chaos, I was a straight A student, genuinely how the fuck I'm not that smart, who is hoping to become a doctor or something that could make me enough money to GTFO out of my family situation. I unfortunately also went through a stint of alcoholism and ruined my credit score and maxed out 3 credit cards and had no money. I failed too many courses because of all my partying, went into a major depression, then came out the other side literally finding enjoyment in life once I realized I could take control in small ways, like dyeing my hair, writing novels, I'm going to be a published author soon, and finding enjoyment in smaller things. I basically did a speed run on midlife crisis, I think, and I'm literally a different person now. Here's where everything makes me laugh, though. A few months ago, my dad died, and my brother found him when he came home from school. That 13-year-old boy was more useful to the emergency responders than my howling mother, who abandoned her kid to run into the street wailing, "I can't go back in there." Initially, it looked like foul play because some cousins were at his house around the TOD. However, when the autopsy came back, it was ruled a natural death. When I got the text from my aunt to come home, I remember how distraught she was since this was her brother. I gave her a hug, helped her out, then went to my room. I turned on the TV and felt nothing. A few days later, nothing turned into major relief. A week later, it turned into happiness. Following his death, two of my cousins who hated me overdosed together. My grandmother has cancer and it's terminal. My mother has turned into a shell of herself and even worse with her behavior. She's emotionally abusive and always treats her kids like shit. My brother moved in with us because we're hoping to put my mother in a home soon. I'm not sure if she's mentally stable anymore after losing my father. I thought she'd be better after losing the man who would abuse her, but she's spiraling. I don't feel anything for her, though, and I just roll my eyes when she tries to guilt trip me and had to take my brother's phone from him so she couldn't do the same to him. My gran is trying to leave me the business in her name, but I refused. I told her I didn't want anything from her and to not take my memory with her to the grave. She's distraught but seems to understand me. She tells me out of everyone, I'm the most like her, too stubborn to quit and too proud to bow. She loves it and hates it. In the last few days, my gran finally gave me a lot of insight to her life. She told me in immense detail what she experienced, and it made sense why she treated abuse the way she did. It was normal to her, and compared to her childhood, mine was quite kind, if I'm being honest. I won't repeat those stories here, but it made me cry. It made me realize that generational trauma is a very real thing, and it doesn't improve over one generation. Breaking the cycle means descendants having to address the issue for lifetimes to come. My gran made many mistakes in her life, but she also rescued me several times. I know she was a terrible woman, but please remember this is a highlight reel and that there is good in between some of it, which is what made some of this so hard. My dad had good moments, so did my gran. They're people, which is so important to remember when you're trying to heal as well. I made this post as a sort of soft launch to starting to heal my trauma by screaming into the void first, because I think I'll give therapy a try. Not yet, but soon, when I'm more comfortable with sharing it all. I'm not ashamed of my life. I've become a better person on the other side. I always considered therapy a tool, not a solution like a lot of people think of it as. And I always thought of it as a tool for people to gain self-awareness and understand self-actualization. It helps with people who've gone into shock from trauma, but I never felt like it would be useful to me. Should I go? Absolutely. But a rock is still a rock, even if you cut it into small pieces. You can't change what happened to you, just move on from it, which I'm trying to do. I genuinely would never wish this life on anyone else, but also, I weirdly love who I've become. Others probably don't. I'm low-key a bitch, but I made this person from all that shit, and I think I turned out okay. So yeah, just wanted to scream into the void once and get comfortable with all this before it became a big thing. If you read this, thank you for taking a moment, and I hope you never go through life thinking any sort of abuse is okay. I noticed a lot of people normalize abuse, and by doing so, it put me into a manic depression for years that I can still struggle with. Just know you're not alone, and no abuse is ever okay.